9th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. I would like to ask for patience as we continue to conduct virtual meetings. There may be slight delays as we transition between speakers, presentations, and participants. If any participants have issues with technology, please send a message to the moderator, Ray. We have 7 discussion items on our agenda today and 1 committee report. 2 discussion items are old business and have already received staff and applicant presentations. I would ask for continued concentration on issues during discussions of the agenda items. We should focus on resolving identified outstanding issues and to be as efficient with our time as possible. I would ask that the commissioners hold all questions until the conclusion of all presentations and any public comment. And finally, please be recognized by the chairperson before speaking. With a full agenda of discussion items today, I would ask everyone to be efficient with our time so we can discuss all items. And with that, we usually start with public comment. This is an opportunity for public comment not related to any item on the agenda, and no one is signed up for public comment today. So with that, we will move on to the consent agenda. This is a list of requests that can be acted upon in one motion. There are 5 items on the consent agenda: 1 comprehensive plan amendment, 1 staff discussion item, and 3 rezoning requests. The comprehensive plan amendment is the annual progress report and associated changes to the comprehensive plan. This will be referred to the committee of the whole. The staff discussion item is the equity analysis for rezoning reports. This will also be referred to the committee of the whole. A time extension is needed for one of the rezoning cases, Z5020, which has previously been discussed. Staff recommends a 30-day time extension. The remaining rezoning requests would be deferred to a future meeting. So with that, I would ask for a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda. Commissioner Winters.
I move that we accept items on the consent agenda.
Okay. Do I have a second? Commissioner Bennett.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Winters and a second by Commissioner Bennett. I would ask Shanitha for a roll call of members to record individual votes. And at the end of the roll call, I will announce the outcome.
Good morning. Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fox?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hicks?
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver?
Aye.
And Commissioner Winters?
Aye.
That's unanimous and it passes. Okay. Next, we move on to the committee report. Let's begin with the committee report. The Committee of the Whole met and discussed Comprehensive Plan Amendment CP 320. This is a staff-initiated request and would modify the comprehensive plan to include policy guidance for equitable development. The committee discussed this item on January 28th and recommended approval unanimously. I would like to make a motion to accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole and recommend approval of CP 320. Is there a second? Commissioner Fox. Thank you.
Second.
Thanks. With a motion and a second, I'll ask Shanitha for a roll call.
Now, quick for me today. Okay. Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fox, how do you vote?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hicks,
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman,
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver,
Aye.
and Commissioner Winters.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous and the motion passes. Next, the committee heard Z 4920, which is a request to rezone property at 3624 Tryon Road. The committee discussed this item on January 28th and recommended approval of the request 6-3. I would like to entertain a motion. Sorry. I would like to entertain a motion from one of the commissioners. I can give you a little help here. The request is not consistent with the comprehensive plan or future land use map, but it is reasonable in the public interest as the applicant has offered conditions to mitigate development impacts, and the site is not appropriate for residential use as the applicant has indicated soil contamination on site. Would someone like to make a motion? Commissioner O'Haver.
Yeah, I will attempt to make a motion since I made the motion initially at the committee of the whole. So I move to recommend approval of Z 4920 as the rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest. Due to the statements Chair Hicks just made, as well as I think we talked a lot about the existing development pattern in that area. Let's see. And some of the consistent policies is LU 2.2 compact development, LU 7.1 encouraging nodal development, LU 8.11 development of vacant sites.
Okay, and do we have a second? Commissioner Miller. Thank you.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and with that, I will ask Shanitha for a roll call.
Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fox,
Nay.
Commissioner Hicks, Vice Chair
Nay,
Hicks, yes. Nay, I'm sorry, was that nay?
that was, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lampman,
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh,
Nay.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver,
Aye.
and Commissioner Winters.
Nay.
So I have 4-4, which is a tie. So can staff provide some guidance here?
Unless someone indicates that they're going to change their mind such that a recommendation of denial had a different outcome, I would suggest you just hold it at the table until the next meeting.
Okay. Commissioner O'Haver.
Mr. York, it seems like if I remember the last time we ended up here, there was also the ability to move it forward without a recommendation. Is that a possibility on this case?
Yes, that's always an option. Yes.
So do I need to make a motion to move it forward without a recommendation?
Yeah, if that's what you want to do, that's fine.
Commissioner O'Haver.
I'd like to make a motion to move this case forward without a recommendation.
Second, Commissioner Miller.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to move Z 4920 on without a recommendation. I will ask Shanitha for a roll call.
Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fox,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hicks,
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman,
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver,
Aye.
and Commissioner Winters.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous and it passes. Okay, we will now begin the old business portion of the agenda. These are requests that have appeared on previous Planning Commission agenda and have received both presentations and public comment. There are 2 items under old business. The first one is item E1, case number Z3420. It is a request to rezone approximately 82 acres of land from Wake County zoning to commercial mixed use 3 stories, conditional use, residential mixed use 4 stories, parkway conditional use, and residential 10 conditional use. This request was discussed at a previous meeting and deferred to allow the applicant to modify the zoning conditions, and the applicant has revised the zoning conditions. I would ask staff for a brief update on the revised conditions, and John Anignost is here to present on behalf of staff.
Good morning. So this case has been revised since you last saw it to clarify the buffering conditions around the northern portion of the site on the eastern side of Forestville Road. And so if we could advance the presentation to, there's an exhibit slide after the condition slide that we can look at that will be helpful with that discussion. But just as a general recap of the case, it's a request to allow up to 50,000 square feet of non-residential development and about 400 dwelling units. I think that exhibit slide might have been hidden. Okay, so the applicant has, it's the second slide there, the second one. Yep. Has worked with the property owners here. So the property along Forestville Road is owned by a Miss Annie McGee. And so along that property, there would be a buffer area that would be, if it's disturbed, would be replanted with landscaping. And then outside of that buffer, additional planting, and then a similar treatment along the property to the east, which is owned by Steve Morrison, where there would be a buffer where if it's disturbed would be replanted, and then additional planting on the outside of it. And then along that entire buffer would be a fence. And so there are varying depths, and then also outside of the buffer is a building and parking setback. And the depths of those buffers and setbacks vary as you pass along that property line. I will note that this exhibit does contain an error at the eastern end where it says a 150-foot fence setback. That actually, the fence setback is 60 feet. What that was intended to say, and what is clearly said in the conditions, is that the fence would continue along that riparian buffer you see along Forestville Road for an additional 150 feet after it left the property boundary. So those conditions are clearly worded. The applicant has provided a substitute exhibit that accurately represents what the conditions say, and that could be added to these as a technical revision after a planning commission recommendation. So those issues with regard to the conditions are resolved, and so there are no staff concerns with the wording or exhibit with these conditions at this time. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So we have already received an applicant presentation and heard from members of the public on this request. If there's a desire to hear from the applicant and anyone signed up to speak, the commission would need to vote to allow for extra time. And there are a few people that are signed up to speak. I can't see all the commissioners. Thank you. So if there is a desire, would folks like to hear from the public? I'm seeing some yeses. So Without objection, I would like to grant 3 minutes to the applicant and 3 minutes to those who signed up to speak. And Michael Birch is will present on behalf of the applicant.
Good morning, Chairman Hicks, Michael Birch, Longleaf Law Partners, here on behalf of the applicant. Appreciate John's presentation. As he mentioned, since we were last before you a month ago, we have worked with Miss Annie McGee and Steve Morrison along our northern boundary line and have revised conditions to increase buffers, increase setbacks, extend fencing, limit lighting, and a variety of things for both of those property owners, consistent with the Planning Commission's direction at the last meeting. And we have also revised our conditions to address all of the kind of staff comments. So those conditions no longer impact any transportation issues as well. So I do want to note, while we are allowing for some non-residential there at the intersection of Forestville and Lewisburg Road, we are limiting that to 50,000 square feet, whereas about 175,000 square feet of non-residential is allowed under the current zoning in the county. I want to note that this case is consistent with the future land use map, the urban form map, comprehensive plan. It's compatible with the surrounding area. It has the public benefits of allowing additional housing supply and housing diversity in the area with single family, townhomes, and apartments. We are permitting a mix of uses within walking distance to that planned residential as well as the residential to our west and north. Development of this property under the city's regulations would provide a full road that is on the city's street plan and would provide for much needed transportation improvements, including sidewalks on both sides of Forestville Road, additional lanes, both northbound and southbound on Forestville Road, over 3,000 feet, essentially, of new streets on Forestville Road, as well as a turn lane off of Lewisburg Road, and a signal at Forestville and Hartham Park Road. So significant transportation improvements, resulting only in a slight increase in delay at key intersections at Lewisburg and Leland and Lewisburg and Forestville. So for all those reasons, we'd ask you to recommend approval of this case. Thanks.
Thank you. There are 3 persons signed up to speak on this matter. Ray, can you introduce them?
Yes, one second. I have Annie McGee here first.
Yes. Hi. Thank you, Ray. First, I wanted to say that I am very thankful for the communication that I've received with Michael. He has made sure that my comments have been heard and listened to, and that they've made sure to apply them into the conditions. So I first wanted to show my appreciation for the whole situation, as it's impacted me a lot. The only remaining concern that I have is for the traffic right in front of my house, where there is a design right now to open up the road for 4 lanes down to 1 lane, which it is right now, are 1 per side. And that narrowing in is actually going to happen right in front of my driveway. That is my only remaining concern in this whole situation. And I was told it's not necessarily something that is at the Planning Commission for the rezoning, but I did want to make sure to at least voice that one last concern that I have with the traffic. But that's all it is right now.
Thank you.
We have transportation staff who've offered to speak to that.
Thank you.
Jason Myers.
Yeah, I'm actually pulling up a map right now. Apologize for the delay. The applicant, the zoning case doesn't have a full frontage on Forestville, so it is not really possible for them to require right-of-way outside of their site on property that they do not control and is not already in the right-of-way. There are, I'm told, some negotiations and discussions going on between the applicant's team and the NCDOT about the recommendations of the TIA and how they would like to see improvements made to the intersections in the area and to the configuration, given what the TIA shows, which is that there is some significant delay and some issues there. So the site improvement, the frontage improvements will certainly be an aspect of that, demonstrating infrastructure sufficiency at the site plan stage, and specifically given that NCDOT is in control of both Forestville and Lewisburg and is concerned, they will really be driving that discussion. But yeah, from Hartham Park Avenue south to Forestville, that is not on the west side land that the applicant can control or necessarily make improvements in. Does that answer Planning Commission's questions?
Thank you.
All right, the next speaker is Steve Morrison.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I want to say, although I'm not crazy about the idea of townhouses up against my large property, we've come a long way since that first rezoning request notice. We've got buffers, setbacks, a fence, plantings, all tailored to my specific concerns. I don't think this would have been possible had it not been for Michael Birch's willingness to work with the affected landowners to the extent that seems to go beyond the norm. As a side note, I do have a final concern about residents making use of the buffer areas and how that can somehow be mitigated by community restrictions disallowing that use. However, Michael has offered to help facilitate that conversation with the developer. Back from that digression, I would like to thank the owner, developer, and Michael Birch for working with me during this process. Relatively high density development around a large property can be very stressful for a property owner. Michael's willingness to work with me during this case has greatly reduced that stress. I think this level of community engagement should, however, be more the norm rather than the exception. If this were the case, maybe people would be more likely to embrace rather than to oppose changes around them. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
All right, that's all we have.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I would now like to allow for questions and comments from commissioners. Does anybody have questions or comments? All right. Commissioner Winters.
Thank you. I have a comment. What Mr. Morrison just said, I echo that wholeheartedly about communication between community as well as developer for win-win situations. It is incredibly encouraging to hear such accolades being bestowed upon a developer and Mr. Birch and the community, because it's rare that we hear that. And for his statement to say that there will be less resistance if there was more communication and working together. So I applaud Mr. Birch, the developer, and the community.
Thank you, Commissioner Winters. I agree. I think it's a nice precedent, and it's when a case comes before us like this and the community and the applicant and the owners can all work in tandem. Commissioner Fox.
I was going to go ahead and make a motion to approve the, motion to approve Z3420 as it is reasonable and in the public interest and consistent with the comprehensive plan, specifically policies related to large site development, reducing vehicle miles traveled through mixed use, buffering requirements, and traditional neighborhood development.
Thank you. So we have a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Miller.
Can you please include the future land use map recommendation as well?
Thank you.
There's an area at the corner of Lewisburg and Forestville that would be community mixed use if this is approved.
Amendment to the motion. Additionally, this motion would alter the future land use map and change it to community mixed use as stated.
Second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Commissioner Fox and a second by Commissioner Miller. And I will ask Shanitha for a roll call.
Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fox,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hicks,
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman,
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver,
Aye.
and Commissioner Winters.
Aye.
Okay, that is unanimous and it passes. Moving on to the next item is item E2, case number Z4620, Creedmoor Road. This is a request to rezone approximately 2.4 acres of land from residential 4 to commercial mixed use, 3 stories conditional use. The request was discussed at our last meeting and the applicant indicated a desire to submit revised conditions to address exterior site lighting. I understand that the applicant has submitted revised conditions. Hannah Reckhow will provide us with an update on behalf of staff.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As was mentioned, the applicant has submitted revised zoning conditions. We'll advance the slides, a couple slides. Look at those. Thanks. So a third condition has been added that specifies outdoor lighting in a Zone B neighborhood transition area would consist only of full cutoff light fixtures. So for some context, the neighborhood transition yard requirement on the site would apply 3 out of 4 property boundaries. First area is the landscaping area that is directly adjacent to the property boundary and no building or parking would be in that area. The next area, the Zone B, there's no building that can be located in that area, but uses such as parking could be located there. So this condition is specifying in that area, only full cutoff lighting would be permitted. And so this condition does not alter the maximum build out under this requested district, but does affect the lighting in this area. You can take any questions.
Thank you. We have already received a presentation from the applicant at our last meeting, and there are no members of the public to speak on this request. If there's a desire to hear from the applicant, the commission would need to vote to allow for extra time. Since there is no one signed up to speak on this matter, I guess first I should ask if there's any questions or comments from commissioners. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, let me back up. I know. Yep. So, I'm sorry. Is there any interest in providing additional time for the applicant to speak? Seeing none, and seeing no comments from commissioners, I would entertain a motion. Commissioner Miller.
I'll make a motion to approve case Z3420 as it's consistent with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan, and it is reasonable and in the public interest due to the policies, the comprehensive plan policies related to large site development, healthy communities, density transitions, and traditional neighborhood development.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? Commissioner O'Haver. So Commissioner Miller has made a motion to approve. Commissioner O'Haver has made a second.
Real quick, sorry for the interruption. If she could just, if Commissioner Miller could just clarify, I believe she said Z34. I think she meant Z46.
I did mean Z46. Sorry about that.
That's all. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Thank you.
I thought I was the one that was confused. Thank you for that.
4620.
Great, thank you for that amendment. Okay, I will ask Shanitha for a roll call.
All righty. Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fox,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hicks,
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman,
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver,
Aye.
Commissioner Winters.
Great. So that is unanimous and it passes. Okay, so we will now begin the new business portion of the agenda. These are requests that have not been heard on previous Planning Commission agenda. There are 4 rezoning requests for discussion today. The first item is F1 case number Z2320 East Morgan Street. And this is a request to rezone approximately 1 acre of land from downtown mixed use 7 stories urban general to downtown mixed use 40 stories urban general conditional use. Matt Clem will present on behalf of staff.
Good morning, Chair Hicks and Planning Commission. So this is a request to rezone just under 1 acre from downtown mixed use 7 to downtown mixed use 40 with urban general frontage and zoning conditions. The RHDC, the Historic Developments Commission, recommended approval of the site of the request if the height was reduced to 12 stories. So they're looking for a shorter structure on the site here than what is requested. And your deadline is March 8th. And so that means you have today's meeting and the meeting on February 23rd, your next meeting, to act on this case. So you could either, at the next meeting, you could make a request for approval or denial or request an extension to your deadline. So this is a look at the zoning in the area, which is predominantly downtown mixed use, that DX district. There's varying heights in those districts ranging from 3, 4, 7, and 12. So this would be the tallest building in that immediate area. There's also a couple of historic overlay districts nearby. The property is not zoned with any additional local historic district or designation, and it's also not located in a national district or designation. But they are nearby. Here's an aerial view of the site. So currently the site is a parking lot that supports the Marbles Museum and IMAX and I believe likely other uses in the area. You can see we're just east of the downtown core. You can see the Capitol building on the left side of the screen. And to the northeast, you can see where we start to get into the Oakwood neighborhood. Next slide. A view heading north on Person Street of the parking lot there. Next slide. Looking eastbound on Morgan at the site, you can see the Marble sign and the IMAX behind the trees there. Next slide. So zoning conditions would prohibit certain uses, auto-oriented uses, high-intensity uses, adult establishments, pawn shops, and the like. The request is for a 40-story district, but the applicants have offered a zoning condition that would limit building height to 30 stories, so lower than that 40-story district. They've also limited office square footage to 150,000 square feet. Next slide. A look at your entitlement here, what can be built under current and proposed zoning. Setbacks aren't changing, but there are some significant increases to a residential density here and unit entitlement. Next. Increases in office and retail square footage as well. Retail doesn't really get that much larger because, of course, we're assuming a single-story retail. So that's really based on the size of the property. Next slide. So the site has a higher walk, transit score, and bike score than most of the city. Let's see, let me pull up my report here. So the transit score is 78, the city's average is 30, the walk score is 94, and the bike score is 92 compared to 30 and 41 city averages. So according to walkscore.com, the site is a walker's paradise, meaning that daily trips do not require a car. It's a biker's paradise where daily trips and errands can be accomplished on bike. It also has excellent transit access. Next slide. So the site is about 1,000 feet from Moore Square Station, which serves nearly every local and regional transit service the city has to offer. There are trips that go outside of the city and around to other Wake County jurisdictions. It has so it has that regional service and local service. It's also near future station areas for BRT on New Bern Avenue, which should be operational in a few years. So this is a really great example of what you would consider transit-oriented development, increasing density in an area where people can live their daily lives, run their daily errands, and rely on transit and walking to do so. So in terms of housing affordability, it adds a lot to the supply. It does not include subsidized units, variety of housing types, of course. The apartment building is smaller and more affordable than other types of housing in the area and in the city, and of course within walking distance of transit, meaning that if you live here, you will spend likely less money on transportation costs. So ownership of a car, purchase of gasoline, tires, maintenance, that type of thing is a larger expense for families. So living in a place where you don't have to rely on those things also is an improvement to affordability. Next slide. Future land use map is Central Business District, and the closest corresponding zoning district to that designation is downtown mixed use, so that's consistent. Consistent with the urban form map here, we are again within walking distance of nearly every transit route the city provides today, and BRT, which is coming soon. And it is in downtown, so the urban form designations are consistent with that. Future land use map, urban form, again, a handful of policies, compact development, again, capitalizing on transit access and zoning and infrastructure impacts. This is all consistent based on increasing density in an area where folks can live a less auto-dependent life. Next slide. Station area land uses. We're within a station area of Moore Square Station and forthcoming BRT stations, allowing people to live and work without driving their car for every trip helps reduce greenhouse gas per capita, which advances the city's goals of reducing emissions. Zoning for housing, a pretty big jump in entitlement here. Again, urban form and frontage and vertical mixed use as contemplated in the comprehensive plan is consistent. Next slide. Underutilized sites in downtown is currently a parking lot, which is called out specifically in that policy as something that the city would, or the plan would encourage redevelopment of. The level of density, 350 households, we think max would certainly support the retail establishments in the city's urban core. High density development, of course, 30-story vertical mixed use, and other policies saying we need more housing and development in the city center. Next slide. Again, your deadline for action is March 8th, meaning your following meeting this month on the 23rd will be your time to take action on the case. The applicants are here. I can answer questions. We have RHDC representatives here, our preservation staff. If you have questions about the RHDC memo or anything else regarding local districts or designations, there are no members of the public other than the applicant signed up to speak on the case.
Great, thank you. Next, we will hear from Mac Paul representing the applicant. The applicant and all those in support have 10 minutes to speak.
Thanks, Chair Hicks. This is Mac Paul, Morningstar Law here on behalf of Beverly and Gordon Smith, who own this property. I'll give you just a little bit of background to understand their thinking and kind of what led to the rezoning request. I think probably many of you know Gordon through his activities in downtown over the years, but just to provide a little bit of background, Gordon Smith had a vision for this area of downtown, going back 40 years, and started acquiring property to develop what became Explorers Museum, now Marbles, and a number of educational facilities, museum, magnet school at Moore Square, Explorers School. He also created a teacher's village and partnered with a developer to bring affordable housing so that folks who work downtown have a place to live downtown. More recently developed the Lincoln to the east. And this property came about because Wake County is the kind of the owner responsible party for Marbles through the interlocal agreement with the city of Raleigh. And much of this block was assembled for the Children's Museum. The county came to Gordon a while back and asked that he help acquire this property in order to create the IMAX theater. The IMAX theater is now on the adjacent lot, so it was subdivided. So he still owns this lot as well as two buildings within the block that we're looking at. The two buildings he owns, he's maintained and renovated and is keeping them as they're historic buildings and not part of this rezoning request. So the only part of the block is the surface parking lot. We talked to staff, looked at the property, and decided to proceed with this rezoning without a development partner chosen yet. Now we're in a pandemic, and because of that, that we don't have a development partner. We're kind of waiting to get through this period, but wanted to proceed with the rezoning because it is a very a clean site from the standpoint of the comprehensive plan. As you heard, it's consistent with all policies and there are no outstanding issues with it. It's also on an axial street, in essence, there, where taller buildings should be. I'll also note, while we do have some historic districts adjacent to it, to the extent there are areas around here that don't have a historic district, like this, the city owns much of the block just to the east of the Moore Square Historic District, which is zoned for 20 stories. And then, of course, the federal property across Person Street at 12 stories. So again, we feel pretty straightforward. Obviously, here to answer any questions. Gordon and Beverly are on the line and happy to answer any questions as well. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. And there is no one else signed up to speak on this matter from the public. So I would like to now allow for questions and comments from commissioners. Does anyone have a question or comment? Commissioner Haver.
Can someone help me understand the RHDC? It looks like it's outside of that area. So, and reading through the staff report, it seems extremely consistent. Can someone help me understand that, how that's entered in and how that occurs?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Haver. We do have Tanya Tully with preservation staff who I'll hand it over to in just a minute. I think a way to think about RHDC's role in this review process is, their view of all of these requests are through the very specific lens of historic preservation. And so, when they provide comment on a case like this and provide review, they're looking at it solely through that perspective, which is an excellent and helpful perspective. And so they're providing a different level of review and service than the planning staff is doing. And so I'll hand it over to Tanya now, if she wants to expound on any of that or speak specifically to any of the items in the memo.
Sure. Hello, Tanya Tully here, senior staff to the Raleigh Historic Development Commission. So what Matt said is correct, and there was a lot of discussion about this case. They definitely applauded the applicants for using a vacant parcel. The concern really just had to do with the height and the context. One of the historic preservation policies in the comprehensive plan speaks to protecting the scale and character of historic neighborhoods while allowing compatible and contextual sensitive, infill to happen. And so this site being, sort of sandwiched between historic districts, that's the lens that they were talking about. That they were thinking of. And so really that's where they were coming from, simply the height and its adjacency to the historic districts. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Miller.
Sure. I'm trying to understand a little more to Commissioner Haver's question about the role of RHDC and sort of scope of authority when it comes to projects that are not located, projects like this one that are not located in any historic district.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Miller. And, the RHDC has a role very similar to the Planning Commission. They make recommendations on requests that they hear. And so oftentimes when there's a rezoning request that is near or within some historic district, the RHDC will request a presentation from the applicant and staff, and then they'll make a recommendation to the Planning Commission and, as well to the City Council. And so they're bringing kind of that perspective to the conversation. And so their role is to make recommendations similar to what you all do.
Has this happened on other cases before? I just don't remember this happening before when it's not in a historic district.
That's a great, I don't know offhand exactly, the entire history of their remarks or recommendations. So we could look and see if there's other precedents for when they've done this. I think Tanya may be able to help.
Yeah, and also this is Ken. There are precedents for the RHDC commenting on zoning cases that are located outside of historic districts, but either adjacent to local historic districts or national register districts or local landmarks or national landmarks. And again, the comments are advisory, that they are fulfilling their role and consistent with policies in the comp plan that talk about consideration should be given to impacts on historic structures for rezoning based on proximity or adjacency as well as being within the district itself. They have no formal authority to approve or deny anything associated with this particular zoning case because it is outside of a local district, but we do often engage them on these types of matters just to provide a different perspective, a preservation-based perspective on the zoning case.
Gotcha. And that makes sense. Obviously, their perspective is an incredibly valuable one in these types of things. More just thinking from an applicant standpoint, when they're trying to be able to anticipate what the process is going to look like, trying to be able to identify when something is located in a specific area, what that process is going to look like there. So, and it sounds like it might be a little bit fuzzy around some areas that are near historic districts, but not necessarily located within them in terms of what the process is going to be like.
Commissioner Fox.
I have a question related to the specifics for the requirements for step backs in tall buildings. Mr. Bowers, can you remind me of that?
You're just looking for the current UDO provisions for step backs?
Yeah, and what between what stories and what the depth of that would be?
Sure. Let me put the code in front of me to give you a precise answer so that I don't misquote it. But you're correct. Above a certain number of stories, you have to step a building back. There is, of course, the opportunity to get administrative alternate relief for that, which many projects have applied for and received. That is a hearing in front of the Appearance Commission to do that. So, hold on just a second. The step back kicks in above 7 stories, and it's a 12-foot step back for buildings between 8 and 12 and 15 feet for any building greater than 12 stories. And the step back has to be located between the 3rd and the 7th story of the building. And the other key thing is that you can get a smaller step back if you're able to match a cornice line from adjacent buildings, but that would not be the case here since I don't think there are adjacent buildings directly to the site that would have a cornice line that would match. I would, in the interest of full disclosure, there is a text change which will be coming to you in the not too distant future that looks to amend the building massing standards in some significant ways, including the step back standards. It's part of a larger text change just looking at the entire administrative alternate process and standards and how they're applied.
So as it currently stands, I personally believe the step back requirement can provide that datum line to deal with some of the height and massing concerns, specifically at that 12-story line. And I'm more concerned about how this particular project meets the street and also how a parking deck would be dealt with adjacent to a historic district. So I'm wondering perhaps if Ms. Tully could give me a little bit of information about the character statement for the adjacent districts.
Sure. Just a moment. So the 2 adjacent districts, one is the Capitol Square Historic Overlay District that is to the north, and then to the south is the Moore Square Historic Overlay District. Both of them are commercial in character, largely, but they are lower in scale. And both of them are, let's see, additionally, there are some formerly single-family homes that are now used as businesses in the Blunt adjacent Capitol Square Historic Overlay District. Did that answer your question?
I was wondering if there was a commentary related to use of materials at the pedestrian level.
I mean, you see a lot of brick, largely, is what you mostly see. Brick. There's some the Tabernacle Baptist Church, well, it's its historic name, does have some squirt stucco, I believe, but largely what we see at the pedestrian level is going to be, storefronts and brick.
Commissioner Fox.
The question for the applicant, have they considered any conditions to go above and beyond code requirements and address pedestrian scale design or materiality?
Oh, hey, do you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we have had, we did have a conversation with one planning commissioner who raised the material question, and we've talked about it. And well, I've used conditions on cases where we have required certain high quality, durable building materials, and we're open to that if that was something that the planning commission wanted to see.
I see a thumbs up. I would like to add on to that. That is a condition that I would be interested in seeing is some sort of guidance on the quality of the materials in this area. I think that would be very useful. And also comment, to my mind, for me, part of the important role of the RHDC letter is as if this case goes forward and as it moves forward in time and gets developed, to have those comments attached to the review of this rezoning. In that, I think that the UDO required step backs in this particular area are really important to be contextual with the historic surroundings. And so an administrative alternate to remove those would be really detrimental in my opinion. And so anyway, I think for me that the role of the RHD review is important in terms of emphasizing that importance and context. Any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Lampman.
I apologize if this was stated. I'm just a little bit confused on the number of stories. So it looks like the requested zoning is DX 40 for 40 stories, but then they're saying they're going to limit it to 30 stories, but then there were some applications that were done at 20 stories. So I guess I'm not sure about height.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Lampman. So when the request was first made, the applicants requested a 20-story district, and then during the review period, they amended subsequently the request to the 40-story district, and then conditioned it down to 30. And so you may be seeing the original application or original set of signed zoning conditions. We're not sure exactly what which document you're looking at, but when they originally submitted the application to staff, it was for a 20-story district, and it has subsequently been amended.
Excuse me, Commissioner Lampman.
And I apologize again if this was mentioned, but what are the heights of the surrounding buildings? It looks like there's a couple that are just a little bit down the way, and I'm trying to just do Google drive-bys to see what the number of stories are for a couple of these buildings.
Sure. A quick look at Google Maps. There are mostly 1, 2, and 3-story buildings in the immediate block to the east. There is a multiple-story building. I believe that's the federal courthouse building. And then, of course, just 2 blocks to the west is Fayetteville Street, where there are towers of 20, 30 stories. This is the thanks for pulling that up. Yeah, so just 1 block to the west, you can see a multi-story building, and then to the east there is another multi-story building of, I'm not sure exactly how many stories, but more than a few.
Commissioner Lampman, is your hand up?
Yeah, I think I would just want to take a moment, if we're going to defer the case, just to look at what the heights are of the surrounding area as we look to expand the downtown footprint. How do the transitions support a 30-story building here, perhaps? So I just wanted to kind of just take a moment and look about how that might be impactful as we grow.
And Commissioner Lampman, Are you also referring to the future land use map?
I suppose that would be a good way to look at it. So thanks.
Commissioner
Would it be
Lattman?
useful to pull the future land use map up for us to look at? I think currently the site to the east is zoned for 12 stories. And then to the north, of course, it's shorter. I think it's 3. The current zoning, not the future land use map.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair Hicks. The site to the east, there's a district that comprises the entire block. That's a 12-story district. You can see immediately adjacent 3, 4, or 3 and 7-story districts. To the north and south, if you look just another block to the west, you can start to see 5 and 40-story districts, 12-story districts to the north. Another block, if you're looking southeast, you'll see 20 and 12 5-story districts, 3-story district directly to the south. I believe that's where Moore Square is, just south of Hargis Street there, the park, that is. So that's, and then if we're looking at the future land use map, which was referenced to, this is considered our core transit area on the table LU2, which would recommend building heights of up to 40 stories. So while there is existing building stock that is, of course, well below that, the city's vision would call for, the vision of the comprehensive plan will call for significantly taller structures here.
Commissioner Haver.
Yeah, I think looking at the zoning and the future land use map, I mean, I'd rather look at the uses. I mean, there's a federal building to the east, the state building adjacent to the Capitol. Marbles is directly to the south with Moore Square. If you go 2 blocks up, though, you're at a recent 40-story rezoning on Wilmington Street and Fayetteville Street, which is, it's in the same vicinity. You've got the church to the northwest. I mean, it's one thing to look at the zoning, but if you look at the uses, I think, to me, I agree with Commissioner Fox. I think perhaps if there's some conditions the applicant would be willing to put forward more about the streetscape and the relation to some of the immediate historic districts, I feel like it's totally reasonable if you look at, again, you zoom out and look at the development pattern, the property owners, and where development is going to go in this area. So that's my perspective.
Thank you, Commissioner Haver. Are there any additional areas of discussion or comments or questions? If not, I think what I'm hearing the commission saying is we'd like to see a few more conditions added to the case, in which case we will hold this case at the table until our next meeting. Okay. Thank you very much. The next item is F2, case number Z4820, South Bloodward Street. This is a request to rezone approximately 1/2 acre of land from residential 10, office mixed use 3 stories, detached and neighborhood mixed use 3 stories, detached conditional use to residential mixed use 3 stories, urban limited conditional use. Ira Mabel will present on behalf of staff.
Good morning, everybody. This is Ira Mabel. So this is, like Commissioner Hicks said, just about 1/2 acre on the southeast portion of downtown. So these properties are not within the historic district overlay. You might be able to make out the diamond pattern just to the left side of that map there, the Prince Hall HOD, which is the historic overlay. but they are historic, so I'll get into that a little bit later. The RHDC has discussed this case one time, back when there were no conditions attached. So the applicant has since submitted new conditions, but the RHDC will not discuss those and then vote on a recommendation until the 16th. And your deadline for action is in March. Yep. So I basically talked about this. It is sort of in the transition area between downtown and the more residential area in Southeast Raleigh. You can go to the next slide. Just for some major landmarks, there's Red Hat in the northwest and Chavis Heights in the southeast, so about equidistant between those two. If you go to the next slide, see a couple more landmarks. Transfer Company Food Hall, not very far away. And that Shaw University building is, I believe, all student residences. This is a map of the National Register District. So not something that has regulatory authority for the city, but does usually trigger a review from the Historic Development Commission. So this is the East Raleigh South Park Historic District. 3 of the houses are contributing, and the 4th one is not. So if we go to the next slide, these are the conditions that were submitted, basically offering the option for some other party, historic preservation related entity to either move the houses or collect any artifacts within them, and specifically applying to the three buildings that are contributing to the district. The 4th was relocated to that site, so not original to the area. So these are some photos. You can see that photo number 1 there, the red brick building. The northern 3 most buildings are historic. So in that photo number 3, the tan house, that is the one that was moved. So the conditions apply just to the other 3, not that 4th southernmost structure. So the increase in entitlement here is more than doubling the amount of residential units that could be constructed. But the current zoning does allow commercial uses. So the existing zoning is neighborhood mixed use and office mixed use. And in an RX district, you're only allowed non-residential uses in very limited circumstances. So an increase overall in residential entitlement, but a decrease in commercial entitlement. It is a fairly high walk score. I won't spend too long on why a site in downtown scores highly left for this. So we can go to the next slide. Fairly good transit service. This site also is fairly walkable to the Moore Square bus station. Would increase the housing supply and would allow all residential building types. So everything from detached to apartment would be permitted in an RX district. Consistent with the future land use map, which is central business district. So generally, even a request for a DX zoning here would be consistent. So given the request is for a district less intense, then we consider that also consistent with this map. Excuse me. Consistent with urban form, so the standard downtown layers apply here, and so the urban limited frontage puts them consistent with the downtown and core transit area. So consistent overall with the comp plan, consistent with policies about infill and density transitions. Next slide, please. The inconsistent policies are all historic preservation related, which is really the condition offered do not affirmatively protect the buildings. They give the opportunity for some other party to preserve them if they choose and have the means to do so. But barring participation from some other party, there's no really protection on the historic assets. So like I mentioned, our HDC is discussing the case a second time, should you wish to hear from them. Pardon me. And there is one more meeting before your deadline is up. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Tom Johnson representing the applicant, and all those in support have 10 minutes to speak.
Okay. Thank you very much. I do have a presentation if we could pull that up. Thank you very much. I'm Tom Johnson with the law firm of Williams Mullen at 301 Fayetteville Street, Suite 1700 in Raleigh, on behalf of the applicant. I did want to clarify one thing that Ira said. We actually have been in front of the RHDC twice. We had an initial appearance and then a second appearance, and the RHDC actually voted to recommend that the project move on at the second meeting, but had suggested some conditions, which is why we came up with the conditions that we did that they're looking at on February 16th. As Ira mentioned, we are rezoning the properties to RX. It's currently predominantly more intense zoning districts, which would be NX and OX. There's a very, very small part that's R10, but that's an extremely small portion of the whole site. The intent is to construct about 10 to 12 townhomes with a maximum of 3 stories in height. And this resulted from meetings, the neighborhood meetings. We had neighborhood meetings, and initially we were looking at a 5-story height or up to a 5-story height, and the neighbors did not like that height, but were comfortable with the 3-story height, which is why we came back and set that at 3 stories. The intent is to, in any design and materials we use, to take the surrounding properties into consideration. Next slide. What we're looking at is townhome projects similar to townhome projects in the area. These are some examples of those that are close by. Probably the closest one is 10 at Person, which is just a couple of blocks over to the southwest. But these are the type of townhome projects that we were looking at in doing this rezoning. Next slide. Again, this is an aerial of the site. The 10 at Person site, again, is shown on the lower left of this slide. Carlton Place is to the north. That's an affordable housing project to the north. And again, everything to the west is either DX or OX. So this provides a transition between those areas and the R10 that is to the east of the site. Next slide. Again, this shows that transition, shows the DX to the west, and the residential properties to the south and the east. And this will again provide that transition, but allow for more density in an area that is more walkable and transit oriented and convenient to downtown. Next slide. These are the homes, the 3 homes, as Ira pointed out. The 4th home was moved to the site from another location. The next slide. This is the prom on the corner. It's a brick home. We date it from approximately 1930. The next slide. This home is serving as a duplex now. It's maybe built approximately 1850. We really don't know, but it's in very poor condition. So someone may want to move it, but it may not because of the condition it's in. Next slide. And this one was built in approximately 1910, but you can see there have been more contemporary additions to the home. So it appears as a more recent home than the older home that it is. And the next slide. And this is the home that was moved to the site in approximately 2008 at 513 Brotherworth. It is not part of the conditions that we added. Next slide. As was mentioned by Ira, this is consistent with the comprehensive plan, consistent with the future land use map, consistent with the urban form map. It's compatible with the surrounding area in terms of the RX that we're proposing. And it's increasing residential development in the urban core with high access to transit, employment options, and high walkability and bicycle access. It's an appropriate transition from single family to moderate density residential to commercial, as I mentioned earlier, with the OX and DX to the west, and provides maximum housing choice and variety. And the urban frontage is consistent with the urban design guidelines. Next slide. As we said on the conditions, prior to demolition, the owner will document the homes with photography and written description, which is consistent with what the RHDC typically asks that be done. Prior to demolition, the owner will advertise for 15 days that the homes are available to donation to anyone who is willing to incur all expense of moving the homes. And if the homes are not moved, the owner will allow the City of Raleigh Museum 15 days to remove any items of historic significance. And as we said earlier, this only applies to 501, 507, and 511, not to the 513 South Bloodworth Street, which is a home that was moved to that location from another location. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. But again, this is kind of as I would say, a down zoning from what it currently is to allow for some higher density residential development in a location that the comprehensive plan provides for. And, there are other projects within the area. The one at Person and the Ware is another one that I would mention is to the northeast about a block. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Let's see, there's one person signed up to speak on this matter. Typically, we allow 10 minutes for those that support or in support and 10 minutes for those that are opposed. Since there's only one person signed up to speak, I would like to allow the standard 2 minutes for that person to speak. And Ray?
Yes, we have Rose Morales on the line. Are you there, Rose?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Should I go ahead and start?
Sure, yes, thank you.
Okay. So my name is Rose Morales, and I currently occupy the home at 511 South Bloodworth Street. I've been here since June of 2010, so I have lived here through the previous owner who owned the other homes, and Mr. Lawson, who currently owns the home. I'd like to say that he is a very good landlord. I haven't had any problem. Anytime I need something done, he does it for me, so I don't have a problem with that. My main concern is I don't live in this home. This is a facility, and I am currently, or have been currently, looking to move my facility since the new owner bought the place because, I'm from Raleigh. I live in downtown Raleigh. Well, I live a mile from here. So I see all of the development going on. And my only concern is as his business is growing, my business will fold. There are zoning issues for me as well. So when looking for a home, I just can't rent a home and move my business there. I'm licensed by Department of Health and Human Services. I have to go through the zoning of City of Raleigh. I have to contact the construction. I have to get approval. And so in doing that, through the years, I've been looking for a home, and there aren't any homes in Raleigh that would accommodate my facility because of all of the other group homes. We used to be able to call downtown and speak to a representative to help us decipher whether the home was available or could be used as a group home. But now we use the IMAP software that the city provided, which unfortunately is not updated. So when I find homes, which I look every day online, I have realtors helping me, I have to go to the IMAPs, enter the address, and lo and behold, a whole lot of red pop up. Those are the other group homes in the area. Like I said, I've been here since, is my 2 minutes up already?
It is, but I'd like to grant you another minute and a half to finish what you're saying. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Like I said, my concern is I'm not at all trying to stop owner from handling his business and doing what he's doing and contributing to the community, but I also contribute to it. And if I don't find a place by the time his plans are in place, then I will have to put my facility, my license on hold, and place my current clients who have been here into other homes that can provide care for them. I contribute to the community as much as possible. We pay taxes, spend all our money here, and I would hate to have to move my facility to another county or another city just because of housing zoning. So, like I said, I'm not trying to stop anything, but if anybody could help me understand what am I supposed to do.
Thank you. Could you repeat what your address is?
511 South Bloodworth Street.
Thank you.
I'm the third house.
Right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Okay, I would now like to allow for questions and comments from commissioners. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Commissioner Miller.
Would staff like to respond to Ms. Morales' questions about and concerns about how to look for appropriately zoned properties in the city?
Yeah, so just having some furious text exchanges here, and it does appear like there is an issue in terms of the availability of up-to-date records as to where existing group homes exist. And the reason why it's important is that currently group homes are subject to a spacing requirement. So if you're looking at a property, you have to determine that it's some distance away from any existing group homes. And in order to make that determination, you have to know where the existing group homes are. Among the issues are that when a group home ceases operation, we don't necessarily get a notification of that. So we may have group homes in our records that are no longer operating, which of course would continue to enforce a radius if we didn't know that, which would be a problem. So the best I can say at this point, having just looked at this, is that we need to do some internal work about how to solve this problem, because obviously the current records are not sufficient for us to properly verify zoning compliance for any new group home that comes in. I can't really offer anything else up on this right now, other than I'm glad to be now more aware that we have this problem.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner O'Haver.
Yeah, to be clear, and again, I guess this is the first time I've had to deal with it, but we've mentioned the RHDC again, and it sounds like they've met twice, but they're going to meet again at the current conditions, but they have no comments now. So if we took their comments under review at the previous case, again, I'm trying to be consistent here. I'm confused as why there's no comments if they've already reviewed the case twice. And that's not against RHDC. Again, I'm just trying to understand what the differences are here. That's all.
Thank you.
Sure. This is Ira Mabel. I believe that was a question for staff. So I'll just say, generally, requests like this that are in a district, whether a local district or a national district, do go before the RHDC. So that is what happened here. We try and get that timing so that their review is complete by the time it gets to Planning Commission. I think it is the preference of RHDC staff that their recommendation goes through you and the two go together to council as one package. So the last time this case was before them, the request was a general use case, so there were no conditions. So part of the discussion was some conditions that RHDC might be interested in reviewing. And so the applicant has since converted the case and submitted conditions, but just due to the timing of the meetings, their review of the, so they haven't seen that, they've heard the case before, but not reviewed the conditions that were submitted. So there might be some further information from RHDC staff. If maybe Ray could unmute Colette, I think.
Hi, this is Colette. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Perfect. So the RHDC did meet at the December meeting, and as part of the discussion of that meeting, some suggested conditions were offered by the applicant, and the commission did vote 6-4 to approve pending the inclusion of the conditions that had been suggested during that meeting. But they also asked that once finalized conditions were included, that the case return to RHDC for a final vote.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Fox, and then I think Commissioner McIntosh, you had your hand up.
Question for Colette. Is the commission, the RHDC, in a position to be able to assist with the relocation of the 3 homes?
I think the commission would be able to help spread the word, but to actually move the homes, I do not think that that would be a possibility at this time.
Thank you.
Commissioner McIntosh.
Thanks. I guess I'm interested in hearing RHDC's, final review of the conditions. And I also have a question on the 4th home at 513 South Bloodworth. So we've heard that it's not being included in these conditions to record the historical residence or give the option of moving the house. But we also heard that this is a house that was moved to this location, and I don't know if I'm making a leap or not, but I'm going to guess that it's a historic home that maybe was moved from somewhere nearby, and I'm wondering if that is the case, if this 4th house could also be included in any historical documentation. I'm not understanding why it's being left out. Is it not a historical home?
This is Colette again. So based on the information that we have through IMAPs, the house was recorded as new construction in 2008, I believe. We, as staff, had not been able to find any information about the house being moved to the site or a prior location. I think that was something that the applicant mentioned in one of our conversations, but we're not sure if it was moved and where it was moved from, if that's the case.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Commissioner Fox.
I was just going to add, I'm interested in holding this one at the table to get the RHDC recommendation, and also I'm very concerned about Ms. Morales's situation. I'd like her to have some time to work with staff to come up with some solution.
Thank you, Commissioner Fox. Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. I have some concerns about this one as well. So the properties, the houses that are there now, I guess I understood Ms. Morales to say she's operating a facility in one of them. Are the other ones rentals or are they owner occupied? And I'll just keep going, just keep note of my questions because I think they're related. And so staff or the applicant can answer them all. So I'm interested in what the price point for the townhomes coming in would be. I'm also generally concerned about the disappearance of historically Black areas. For lack of a different way to say it. Moving the homes out doesn't preserve what was there. And so we are seeing this happening in downtown and around downtown. And it's very concerning. This may be a wonderful development, but it doesn't really replace what's being lost. And I would like to see if this goes forward, some really serious consideration to trying to incorporate the history and the character of what has been there to the extent possible. is there a way, it sounds like Ms. Morales is providing a service, and it doesn't sound like there have been complaints about anything that she's doing. Is there a way that she can be accommodated in the new development? Maybe not, but is there a way? I mean, that certainly shows an effort to acknowledge what's there, what's been there, and to sort of say, you know, we realize we're affecting the character, the history. Let's see how we can work together and maybe take care of her while we still get these townhomes in. That certainly doesn't replace what has been lost, but I think it shows some care and some concern to the historic district. I think that's about all I have to say. I do want to know though the price point of the townhomes, and will they, you know, be affordable to people in that community?
Thank you, Commissioner Bennett. So I think you had asked for, are they owned or rentals, and then the price point? Is that for the applicant? Mm-hmm.
Or staff, whoever can answer it.
I was just going to say, these are rented now. They're all, none are owner occupied at this time. And I can let Robbie Lawson speak to the price point. He's the owner. If you let him speak.
Hello. Thank you, Planning Commission, for hearing this case today. This is Robbie Lawson. I'm the owner of the houses there on South Bloodworth Street. The price point, I think, would be similar to the Ware, which is about a block and a half northeast, which I think is in the $600,000 to $700,000 range. And I think there was a question about the tenant mix, the current tenant mix of who's there right now and how long they've been there. I'll be happy to answer that question as well.
Okay, thank you.
For 501 South Bloodworth Street, we have 4 tenants there. They entered into that lease last year. One of them has been there longer than a year. The other 3 have not. I bought that house in 2013, I believe. And since then, there's been 4 roommates that kind of know each other, kind of don't. And they've kind of been in and out since over the last 8 years. 507, which is the house next door, I believe I bought in 2014. That house has 1 single tenant on one side, 1 single tenant on the other. They've both probably been in there about 3 years. It's gone through several tenant mixes, but both of the tenants have probably been there about 3 years on both sides. 511, where Rose's business is, she's been there before me, and she hosts women that need assistance. I'm not sure how many women live in 511, maybe 3 to 5, something like that. And then the final house, 513, that's gone through several tenants as well. It's a young married couple that lives there. They've lived there a year this month, February 2020 was when they moved in. So hopefully that will give you a little background of who lives in those houses. I think that was all the questions that you had for me so far.
And if I may, I wanted to raise a couple other points that I didn't make it in my presentation, but reemphasize it. The intent would be anything that's built would be consistent with the history and character of the area as much as we can in terms of the construction in the area. And keep in mind that the current zoning, we're taking commercial uses out of the mix by rezoning this to RX. So there could be, redevelopment even under the existing zoning districts. But by moving it to residential mixed use, we're taking out some of those commercial components, so that would not occur. And that's why it's a good transition from the existing DX and OX to the R10 that's surrounding it. Mr. Lawson had indicated, and certainly there's a period of time before anything would occur, even with rezoning, and is happy to work with Ms. Morales to find another location, certainly in cooperation with city staff, if they can identify locations where she can locate, her group home situation. We certainly would work with her in having time to relocate, which there's enough time to do that.
Thank you. I think you made a comment that anything that you would build there as part of this rezoning would be in context with kind of the materials and in the surrounding area. And so I think I would be looking for some conditions specifically along those lines. And those might address some of the inconsistent policies like HP 1.2, 2.4, 2.7, 1.6, which deal with historic resources. So, and I would also support the applicant working with staff to find housing or find a location for the tenant at 511. I think I saw a few commissioner hands up. Before I go on, I think if we want to kind of focus our comments on specific conditions or items that the applicant can address, I think what I'm seeing is that we need some more information from them in the form of conditions and also the RHD report. So we'll hold this at the table. And with that, I'm happy to take any more comments. Commissioner Miller.
Just had a follow-up question for staff with respect to Ms. Morales' concerns. She said that previously she was able to call a number at the city to ask questions about whether homes or properties were zoned appropriately for group homes, and now it sounds like her search is relegated to IMAPs. But the IMAPs are not updated. Is there a resource at the city that she can reach out to other than using the IMAPs?
We'll reach out to her and provide what assistance we can to make sure that she has up-to-date information for her search.
Thank you.
Commissioner McIntosh.
I just wanted to repeat that this site is part of a National Historic District, and I haven't looked in detail at the future land use map, but the question that pops into my mind is, we see that this historic district on the future land use map is largely zoned to be developed, but I have the impression that there are other nearby historic districts that are protected through the future land use map. I could be wrong, but is Oakwood on the future land use map, is that planned to be developed to something other than historic residential, or is that being protected on the future land use map? I guess that's a question for staff.
If I can interject just briefly, my understanding is the National Historic Register doesn't particularly offer protections against structures, and the local historic register can provide those protections.
Yeah, this is Ira Mabel, and Colette or Tanya can feel free to follow up. But yeah, that is the difference between, the National Register Historic District basically provides tax incentives. And so should an owner in one of those districts not be willing or not be interested in those, that's basically the extent of their enforcement, so to speak. There are other options that the city has locally. So across the street from this site we're talking about today is a historic overlay. So that's a zoning overlay that the city has mapped, which comes with certain conditions like every other zoning district. And then there are also historic districts and landmarks, which come with their own set of authority that the RHDC then has. So it's not uncommon for sites in the National Register districts downtown. So like the Warehouse District is another big one that doesn't really have a lot of local authority. We have seen in the past couple of years, a lot of requests for rezonings there in the past. So the big break point is whether or not there's a local regulation applied to any given property.
Thank you for that answer. It's extremely disappointing to hear that. I can recognize the legal distinctions, but from a layperson's perspective, if this area qualifies as a historic district on the national level, it just feels like even if similar designations haven't been made locally, it doesn't seem like that should negate the truth of it being designated a historic district, and especially in this area of town where we have seen the erasure of this community, and it's just this continuing erasure of this historic fabric. I think this is something Raleigh may eventually regret. And I guess the only other thing I'll say is the question on an earlier case today about why the Raleigh Historic Development Commission would review a site outside of a historic district. If we look at this street, these houses on the opposite side of the street from the historic district, they help form that street pattern on this existing street. They're reinforcing the fabric that's a part of the historic district. So I think it's reasonable to consider properties that are facing historic district to also be protected, because that environment on the street is whole when the entire block is intact, or both sides of the street are intact, where you have the experience of walking down that street as it was. And I'm just disappointed.
Thank you for your comment. So just to summarize what I believe I've heard from commissioners is, first, we would like to see some steps taken to help the tenant of 511 find a new location or be incorporated into the existing, but somehow find a new home within the process of the rezoning, realizing that that's not a specifically rezoning related item. We're looking for conditions to incorporate the history and character of the area, and also conditions that address context and materiality. Some of those can be found in the inconsistent policies that I named before, HP 1.2, HP 2.4, HP 2.7, and H 1.6. And I think that's what we're mainly asking for. And then also the RHD report. So with that, we will hold this case at the table. Commissioner Lampman.
How many homes is the owner trying to put on the site? And I will follow up with concerns about displacing people in the area. And would the owner be open, willing to designating one or two homes for folks who would qualify for lower income housing? There are programs that are available, and there might be assistance that can help in that. But I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to provide some sort of low income housing or some sort of housing preservation for folks.
Thank you, Commissioner Lampman. Commissioner Winters.
Thank you. And well, one, to piggyback off of Commissioner Lampman, if space could be made available for Mrs. Morales within the structure, something to consider. I would really appreciate seeing that. I too want to echo my disappointment at the erasure of this community or the characteristics of this community. Actually, not only community, but to give it the proper name of South Park. Understanding that change comes, understanding that, but also if we can find a way with that to, as we had in a case before, a proper marriage of the two to try to preserve as much of the history, as much of the character as possible. So to that end, looking at the townhomes that you've given us as examples, I'd be very interested to see which one you think would be a proper fit, because we're talking about not just the materials, but I'm also concerned about the look, because again, with such a historic area, something too modern would seem out of place and it would not be consistent with the characteristic of the community. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Winters. And with no further comment, we will hold this case at the table until our next meeting for further information. Thank you, everybody. The next item is F3, case number Z5220, Holden Road. This is a request to rezone approximately 32 acres of land from agricultural productive to residential 10 conditional use. Hannah Reckhow will present on behalf of staff. Oh, is it Hannah or John?
It'll be me, John.
Okay, John and Ignace, sorry.
No worries. Yep, so this is Z5220, about 30 acres on Holden Road. So this is just west of Forestville Road, north of Buffalo Road, and south of Mitchell Mill Road. And the Harris Creek Elementary School is on the other side of Forestville Road, as we'll see in the next slide. And the request is to rezone to residential 10 with conditions from the current zoning of agriculture productive. And you can see the surrounding zoning is largely residential 4 and then some residential 6 to the south. The conditions on those residential 6 districts do limit the overall density to 4 units per acre and kind of create a sort of a compact style of development where some open space near the Neuse River is set aside in return for flexibility on lot sizes. Next slide, please. And so you can see the larger area. Neuse River is to the west, and as I mentioned, Mitchell Mill and Lewisburg to the north, and Buffalo to the south, and Harris Creek Elementary to the east. Largely a residential pattern of development with some more open space and agricultural style as you move east into Wake County. And this is toward the edge of Raleigh's jurisdiction. Next slide, please. Here you can see a little closer. So the current use of the site is 3 single-family houses and then what appears to be potentially some agricultural type uses. Next slide, please. Here you can see the stub streets and the surrounding neighborhood, Massey Preserve. And so, the surrounding area is pretty much fully developed. And so this development would be required to extend all of these streets from these existing neighborhoods. Next slide, please. Here you can see on Holden Road. So this is the current home at the end of Holden Road. That home is not part of the rezoning case. It's basically the land to the south surrounding that property. Next slide, please. So there are a few conditions here. Overall density will be limited to 106 units, which comes out to about 3.3 units per acre. And then there is a protective yard required along the full length of the southern boundary, and then a much smaller protective yard on the western boundary that only passes along 2 home lots on that side of the property. And then a final condition, which requires stormwater runoff control for a 25-year storm, in addition to the 2- and 10-year storm requirements that apply with the UDF. Next slide, please. Here you can see the development breakdown. So pretty basic expansion of the residential entitlement from 8 units to 106 units. The conditions do prohibit the apartment and townhouse building types. And so even if the applicant was interested in a conservation development option, which ordinarily would allow apartments or townhouses in residential 10, by dint of that zoning condition, even a conservation style development would be limited to detached or attached building types. Next slide, please. The future land use map here is low density residential. So the density is aligned with that, as well as the building types. There are some smaller lot widths and lot areas that would be allowed by the residential 10 zoning that's requested but because of the density and building types being matched with the future land use designation, it is consistent with that category. There is no urban form guidance here. And so overall, the request is consistent with the 2030 comprehensive plan and the future land use map, a number of conditions relating to preserving existing character of residential areas. Next slide. The site is not going to have a great level of service for public park experiences due to a lack of City of Raleigh parks in a nearby area. And so it could be improved by requiring some community amenities as part of the rezoning request. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Let's see, next we'll hear from Collier Marsh representing the applicant. The applicant and all those in support have 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Ms. Chair and members of the commission. I'm Collier Marsh with Parker, Poe, Adams, and Bernstein at 301 Fayetteville Street in Raleigh, here on behalf of the applicant. John did a great job of summarizing this, hopefully relatively straightforward request. I'll highlight just a few additional key points, and then we do have engineers and representatives from the applicant on the line to answer any questions. Next slide, please. There we go. So this request involves 3 parcels, 4020, 4100, and 4112 Holden Road, totaling about 32 acres. The site's currently outside of the city limits, but it's adjacent to the city limits and is within the city's planning jurisdiction. So it will be annexed in through an accompanying request to this rezoning. Although the site is 32 acres, it's essentially an infill site surrounded by developed single-family neighborhoods, as you can see on this slide. Next slide, please. So the staff report highlights the consistency of our request with the comprehensive plan, namely the future land use map designation of low density residential. That says that R2, R4, and R6 zoning designations, as well as comparable densities, would be appropriate. And what we're proposing here, as solidified through our conditions, is a single family residential neighborhood that directly conforms with this designation and directly conforms with the established surrounding neighborhoods. The request is also consistent with numerous policies as outlined in John's presentation, including policies related to conservation of single-family neighborhoods, the provision of needed housing, and infill development. Finally, our request is consistent with the zoning of the surrounding area. Although it doesn't show up well on the slide we're looking at right here, the surrounding properties are generally zoned R4 and R6. In a few cases, conditional use, I think generally limiting development to 4 units per acre. Next slide, please. So our proposed R10 zoning becomes consistent with the zoning of the surrounding R4 and R6 neighborhoods through our proposed conditions. Our first condition is to limit density to 106 total units. So with 32 acres, the condition results in a maximum density of 3.28 units per acre. So as a result, we're actually proposing slightly lower density development than neighboring properties. I note in the staff report that there is some discussion on how the R10 zoning could permit smaller lot sizes and questions about the interaction between, I guess, small lot sizes here and proposed open space. The goal with the R10 zoning here and why we chose that is a matter of other dimensions. So we're actually not contemplating smaller lot sizes than you see in the surrounding area. Instead, the driver is to have slightly smaller side yard setbacks than would otherwise be permitted in R4 and R6 districts in order to permit deeper lots and larger rear yards. So in the face of COVID and looking at how development patterns change and how markets may change, the goal here is to try and add a little more space to the rear of the property to have nice backyards to the folks that enjoy these neighborhoods. Our second condition prohibits apartment and townhome building types. Again, confirming that this is a single family project that will fit well within the surrounding neighborhoods. We've also added 3 conditions based on feedback we heard from neighbors throughout the zoning process. In addition to the 2 required neighborhood meetings, we've met on several occasions with neighbors to the east, to the south, and the west, and have crafted conditions to address their specific concerns. So condition 3 and 4 are similar. They require a 10-foot wide protective yard on most of the southern property line, a smaller section of the western property line for condition 4. Those conditions mimic the standard for a type A protective yard, which would otherwise apply to provide a buffer between a dense mixed-use district and a residential district. And in fact, it would serve to protect a district such as the one we're proposing. What's notable here is that we've actually offered a protective yard that serves to protect more dense development surrounding our property. Now, you may be wondering why only certain lots have been included in those conditions. And I think it helps to show, if we could move back 2 slides. So looking at the site as it stands today, the lots that we've selected, the portions of the property to include this protective yard, if you start on the southern property line, you see a street stub about 2/3 of the way across, I guess on the left-hand side, a street stub connecting to the southern property line. And so our condition contemplates the protective yard, I believe, starting 1 lot to the west of that stub and then extending all the way east, so that the rest of the length of the southern property line. Then the condition 4, that protective yard, if you see the stub on the western boundary, it says Shadbush Street is the stub there. That condition contemplates the protective yard on the 2 lots immediately to the south of that stub. And so the reason why the protective yards are limited to those areas is because that southwest corner is expected to be the majority of the tree conservation area. And so that will already have the primary tree conservation. By operation of the UDO, there would be 3.2 acres of tree conservation in this site. Now, moving north of Shadbush Street, our condition 5 requires enhanced stormwater controls. We've committed to treating up to the 25-year storm in addition to the 2 and 10-year storms. And that location to the north of Shadbush is generally where we would expect a stormwater control measure, and with that enhanced 25-year stormwater controls, slightly larger than would otherwise be required. And then continuing to move north, additional tree conservation heading north towards that northern property line. So that is the reason behind the locations of the proposed protective yards, because on those other property lines, we're already expecting tree conservation area, enhanced stormwater controls. So we've covered, if we jump to my last slide again, we've covered the final condition. We did commit to enhanced stormwater controls based on neighborhood feedback. We're not aware of any documented flooding in the area. However, just being cognizant of general stormwater issues in the area and neighborhood concerns, we have added that condition. So our request is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's consistent with the future land use map. It's consistent with the surrounding neighborhoods. And we've endeavored to show our commitment to be good neighbors through our zoning conditions. So we respectfully request your recommendation for approval of this rezoning, and we are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. There is one person signed up to speak on this matter. Ray, could you introduce them? Oh, and I just wanted to interject that typically we allow for 2 minutes per person for the opposition, for a total of 10 if there's more than one speaker. So I would like to allow for 2 minutes for the speaker today.
We don't have anyone present for this item today.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Then moving on, I would now like to allow for questions and comments from commissioners. Do we have any questions? Commissioner O'Haver.
Just again, let you know I need to sign off, unfortunately, so I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of it. So have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Haver. Okay, I have a question. And that is, the applicant went over where the anticipated stormwater will occur, and the TCA, and that in conjunction with the the protective yards that they're offering, sort of paints a picture, if you will, of how they're creating some buffer along the west and south side of the proposed rezoning. Can those be conditioned in the TCA, the location of that, and or the stormwater? Is that something that occurs during, say, site plan review?
We would expect to include those final details at site plan review. We got a little further ahead of where I think we'd otherwise be in planning stages here, just based on the comments from the neighborhood. Our first neighborhood meeting was relatively quiet, and then the second neighborhood meeting were where these concerns were voiced. And so we worked pretty hard to define where the protective yards would be. And so I think that those are things that would be appropriately addressed at site plan stage. But certainly just looking at the site and looking at the tree conservation requirements, there's only so many places that it can go when you're required to make certain street connections. There's almost certainty provided by the UDO requirements that the tree conservation is going to be in those areas, as well as with the topography of the site dictating where stormwater control measures would need to go.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from other commissioners?
Tika, the speaker actually has arrived.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. Thank you.
It's Brian Anderson. Are you there?
Hi, can you all hear me okay?
We can hear you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Ms. Hicks, for reading my letter and taking that. I really appreciate it. And I hope the other planning commissioners as well will have that opportunity. I just wanted to share a brief story. So I moved into my home on 3720 Cashew on September 3rd. There were 500 feet of forest behind me. I was very excited about it. And that was one of the most attractive features in that home buying process. Just months into that, I got this notice that there would be this rezoning application, and I have a couple concerns. Most notably are noise and privacy. I'm particularly concerned about the connection on Shadbush Street. It would be one door down away from my home. It could peer into my backyard. A 10-foot protective yard right now is one of the conditions I fear wouldn't be enough. And we've seen in previous conversations here at this commission meeting some of the value of the collaborations between these applicants and the homeowners. And I think that it would be helpful to have some more time to have these concerns remedied or to have some conditions placed onto this request. So I'm hopeful that maybe there might be more opportunity beyond a 10-foot protective yard to address some of these noise and privacy concerns that I have, as well as this Shadbush connection that many fellow residents are concerned about as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but thank you so much for the time and all the work you continue to do.
Thank you. Okay, any questions or comments from commissioners? Okay. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion if we're ready. Commissioner Bennett.
I do have a question regarding the caller's concern about the Shadbush connection, and I read his letter too. Does anyone from transportation have anything to say about that?
This is Jason Myers in Transportation Planning. I don't know that I've read the letter, so I may not be directly addressing the concerns. But as John Anagnostic stated, these subdivisions around it were stubbing streets so that we would have a, I guess, cohesive subdivision of land and small blocks, walkable neighborhoods. And from my point of view, the main reason to connect Shadbush and Massey Pond Trail is to make sure that Cashew Drive is not the primary way in. And so that by making this connection, there will be less traffic on parts of the neighborhood that are at least temporarily, when those neighborhoods were first built, as relying too much on one or two street connections. Connected streets also improve emergency response time. They make provision of city services like solid waste more efficient. They reduce total driving distances and are a little bit more resilient to adverse events such as a downed tree or a crash on a major road, or construction, whether it's utilities or the need to put in a water main break or something. So for all those reasons, we have a lot of comp plan policies supporting connected streets, and it would be inconsistent with the plan to do something with the zoning case to prevent an extension of Shadbush or any of the other stones.
Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions, comments? Or I'd be happy to entertain a motion. Commissioner Winters.
Thank you. This is for Mr. Anderson. I just want to be clear. Your concerns were about tree density and how it looked and how it impacts your view.
Thanks for that. I had two main concerns with noise and privacy. So the noise concern is on Shadbush Street. There are a couple other connections that are closer that are on the Macy Preserve neighborhood, which was constructed about a decade after the homes in my street on Cashew Drive. So that was to the noise concern on Shadbush, and the main road, Forestville Road. The closest entries and exits are actually the two other connections on there, and this would be a third connector. So that's to the noise, and there's a view from Shadbush Street about 75 feet away from my property. And from my backyard, there's 500 feet of forest land directly behind my property, about 500 feet of forested land, and a 10-foot protective yard. Under that, you could bulldoze all the trees and then replant a couple new trees, which would take years to do. And there would be concerns that someone could peer into my living room, my backyard, even the master bedroom. And this 10-foot protective yard is just for me and one other home. On the southern region of this zoning request, you have 10 or so homes that have this. There's 9 other homes on my block that do not have this 10-foot protective yard from behind Cashew Drive. So that would be a long-winded way of answering your question there. Forgive me.
Thank you. I believe the applicant would like a minute to respond, and I'd like to allow him 2 minutes to respond.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. So we appreciate the comments expressed by Mr. Anderson, and he and I talked last week to talk through the conditions that we proposed and the impact on his property. I guess addressing the street connections first, what's interesting on this site is that we essentially received a request from neighbors near All Stubs and from neighbors on Holden Road to not have access on their site. So in balancing all those competing concerns and looking at the comprehensive plan, we thought it best to include all required connections, because eliminating one only places a larger burden on other properties. So in the interest of connectivity, we thought that was the best solution here. And we do appreciate Mr. Anderson and other neighbors' concerns about the changing of the site behind them. That is why we included the protective yard bordering his property as well as several others. I don't want it to be lost here that the development we're proposing is actually less dense and less intense than the surrounding neighborhoods. And so the provision of a protective yard to protect more dense neighborhoods, I think, is a significant condition here. And then finally, just noting that tree conservation that covers the rest of the neighboring properties on his street or will at site plan stage. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lampman.
I think this comment is more for Jason Myers and folks with transportation. As I'm looking at access to this particular site, it looks like come off of 540 from Buffalo Road and head up Forestville Road, or they may come off of Mitchell Mill Road. But I just wanted to log this again, that might be additional pressure on Buffalo Road. Just for, I know we're getting a lot of attention for that road, so can we log that as included as future plans for Buffalo Road?
Yes, we have already done that, and it seems likely that a traffic impact analysis would be required for this subdivision at site plan stage. It was narrowly, if I remember correctly, did not, with the conditions, did not meet the trip generation thresholds required at rezoning, but it is certainly, Forestville and Buffalo is an issue that the city staff is very aware of.
Thank you. Commissioner Winters.
Thank you. I'm sorry, this question is for the developer. I'm sorry, I didn't write your name down. Forgive me. When we were talking about the 10-foot protective yard, what I heard Mr. Anderson say was that if those trees are eliminated, you would then put in younger trees that would take years to develop. Is it possible to, as a compromise, to keep like a 10-foot buffer of trees that already exist in their maturity?
That's a good question. So obviously the preference would be to maintain any existing trees that are there. The site has a lot of topography, and making street connections can be challenging in some locations. So not having a fully developed grading plan, we can't answer that question at this stage. So the idea of providing a protective yard, which has required plantings, and the plantings are specified in those conditions, the minimum number of understory trees, upper story trees and bushes, is to provide minimum protections. Obviously, they could be higher, and those planting standards also are the UDO standards for the Type A protective yard. That's where they came from. So again, what we've included there should give some comfort that these are what the city has defined as the appropriate planting standards to provide a buffer.
Commissioner Fox.
Motion to approve Z5220 as it is reasonable and in the public interest and consistent with the comprehensive plan, specifically policies related to conserving, enhancing, and revitalizing neighborhoods and zoning for housing.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Fox. Do we have a second? Commissioner Miller. We have, thank you, a motion to approve by Commissioner Fox and a second by Commissioner Miller. I will ask Shanitha for a roll call.
Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fox?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hicks?
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
And Commissioner Winters?
Aye.
That's unanimous and it passes. Thank you, everybody. The next case is item F4, case number Z6120, Pacific Drive. This is a request to rezone approximately 11 acres of land from industrial mixed use, 3 stories, to residential mixed use, 4 stories, conditional use. Sarah Ellis will present on behalf of staff.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you. Yep, so Z6120 is a request to rezone a single parcel located at 2001 Pacific Drive. It's just over 10 acres, and it's to go from IX3 to RX4 CU, and the Planning Commission deadline for action is April 12th, 2021. Next slide, please. So the site is located just south of the intersection of Millbrook and Atlantic Avenue. It's also in the Midtown St. Albans Small Area Plan region. It's an undeveloped site, so it's just west of Atlantic Avenue off of a small street called Pacific Drive that dead ends into what you're seeing is railroad tracks. So the site is surrounded by a variety of uses. To the south, there's sort of an industrial cluster. To the north, up by Atlantic and Millbrook, there's a little commercial cluster. And then as you sort of tear out further from those main arterials, there's some residential mixed in and more commercial as you're on the main arterials. Next slide, please. So as you can see, it's an undeveloped parcel. The properties in front of it are zoned industrial mixed use, and they have some, they sort of look like large office buildings is the functional use there. And then Pacific Drive is a small street that is unimproved for a large portion of the site, so it currently dead ends into it. And then behind the site, that little divot, if you will, that you're seeing is railroad tracks. And then further west, that is a small farm over there, sort of between Wake Forest Road and Atlantic Avenue. So that's the site's nearest neighbor is a farm, but separated by railroad tracks. And then that building to the south, I believe, is a FedEx distribution facility, so sort of similar industrial mixed use type uses in the area. Next slide, please. So looking into the site, you can see that it's an undeveloped, mostly forested parcel of land. As you can see on view number 1, that's the end of Pacific Drive. It sort of dead ends into the parcel and becomes a dirt road. And then looking west into the site, that's also standing on Pacific Drive. So you can, or I'm sorry, not standing on Pacific Drive. That is inside of the neighboring parcel, sort of standing in the parking lot, looking west into the site. And just what I'd point out is there's a little bit of a topography change. So the site sort of climbs up slightly from its neighbors to the east. Next slide, please. There's just one proposed condition for this. It's to prohibit outdoor sports and entertainment facilities. Next slide, please. So the biggest changes that you're seeing in this request would be a large increase in residential density. So it would increase the maximum permitted units from approximately 173 to approximately 310. The setbacks would remain the same in IX as they are in RX. And again, the biggest changes being requested here is just an increase in entitlement for residential. And the reason being, in IX zoning, there's several restrictions on residential uses, including not being able to have residential on the ground floor. So that would change. That would be permitted in RX. And then single family dwellings are not permitted in IX. So that would be another change that would be permitted should the request be approved for RX. Next slide, please. And this is just showing where you would actually see a decrease in entitlement. So as the request is to go from IX to RX, you would see a decrease in office entitlement as well as a decrease in retail entitlement. And that's because in RX zoning, the office and retail is capped at a maximum of 4,000 square feet. So again, just summarizing this, the request generally is asking for an increase in residential uses, and it would be decreasing the entitlement for all the other entitled uses in an RX district. It's consistent with the future land use map, which is designated office and residential mixed use. Now, I do want to clarify the request is for RX, which I know is different than what we typically see for an OX, an office and residential mixed use flume district. But the way that the comp plan speaks on this matter, it states that a lesser intensity of request is also appropriate and deemed consistent. So that's why this is consistent with what the flume is calling for here. Next slide, please. There's no urban form designation in the area. Next slide, please. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan and with the future land use map of office residential mixed use. Next slide, please. It's consistent with a variety of policies, but generally related to it's increasing the housing density and variety. It's also allowing for an appropriate amount of retail in an office and residential mixed-use flume designation. That designation says that retail should generally be limited, and it is limited by virtue of the RX zoning district. And then additionally, it's consistent with policies stating that redevelopment of an industrial area would be appropriate given the infrastructure in the area. Next slide, please. The only inconsistent policy is commercial uses in industrial areas, and this policy is basically saying that industrial areas should be preserved. So this is one of those situations where you see the comp plan sort of tugs at two different things. So it's tugging at the need for more housing, and then it's also tugging at the need for preserving industrial areas. Next slide, please. There's no outstanding issues with the case, and your deadline for action is April 12th, 2021. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Molly Stewart representing the applicant. The applicant and all those in support have 10 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Chair Hicks. This is Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group. I also have with me today Greg Gleason of Corrigan Real Estate Group. That's the applicant. So we're both available for questions, of course. I did want to mention that in addition to what's noted in your staff report, we actually held a third neighborhood meeting on January 13th. That second one happened during a holiday week, and that was sort of necessary for various timing requirements, but we went ahead and did a third one again on the 13th. 2 people attended that meeting. Just a little bit of additional site context on this site. As staff noted, the residential use is permitted under the existing zoning, as well as contemplated under the future land use map. And truly, I think she focused on exactly the right thing, which is that first floor residential. And that is the key difference in what we're requesting here today. Next slide, please. Thank you. Without kind of making you read through all of this, I just wanted to highlight a couple of statements from this description of the future land use map category. First, that the category encourages a mix of residential and office use, and also that heights, it says, will generally be limited to 4 stories when near neighborhoods, which we're not especially, but additional height allowed for larger sites and locations along major corridors. So we are certainly at the low end of what's contemplated here. Next slide, please. Although the zoning of these 4 lots, which constitute the entire office and residential designation in this area, although these are zoned industrial mixed use, this is not a true industrial area, and you kind of see there the kinds of businesses that surround it. And you can sort of see it from the aerial as well. So what we have here is Ashland Construction there at the top. That's a construction office. And then going south along Atlantic Avenue, you see Regional Acceptance Corporation. That's an auto finance company. Customer HD is a customer service staffing company. And then ROI Revolution is a digital marketing agency. So this is very much surrounded by office uses. And so within that office and industrial mixed use, it seems that residential is the missing piece here. And that's the piece that we seek to fill in today. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to highlight one of the data pieces from the staff report, which is that in talking with neighbors, there have been questions about what will happen at the intersection of Atlantic and Pacific and what's happening there. And just as sort of an initial cut, I wanted to point out that this is effectively a downzoning and reduces the anticipated traffic from that site. Next slide, please. And I'd like to turn it over to Greg Gleason now to just briefly introduce you to Corrigan Real Estate. My apologies, I see I've been unmuted again. Is Greg Gleason still on the line?
I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry. Well, I just wanted to thanks Molly and thanks to everyone on the commission for hearing us. So forgive me if I'm repeating myself. I don't know if I was on mute, but Corrigan is a real estate developer, owner, and operator, primarily in multifamily, and primarily in the Northeast, Southeast, Southwest, and to a lesser extent the West Coast. We're typically long-term owners and holders. We really look to own these things almost permanently. We've owned assets over 20 years that we developed, and that's really kind of the intent here. This is our second project in Raleigh. We really have a lot of affinity for this market and believe in it in the long term. What's in front of you right now is the Piedmont Raleigh, which is our most recent delivery, and it's about 3 miles to the north of the site, across from the Triangle Town Center Mall. This site fully delivered at the end of last year and started leasing in April, and it has had a very, very positive response. We're already over 80% occupied, and had very strong response from tenancy. We tend to be a sort of tenant conscious developer, being a long-term owner. So we put a lot of thought into sort of the amenity considerations and the tenant experience. And again, this project has been very well received. And the 2001 Pacific Drive is, we're looking to build on that. And this is sort of roughly, what we're contemplating for the site. So, 3 and 4 story, multifamily product, market rate, And you know, again, pretty consistent with what was delivered here at the Piedmont Raleigh. So again, I'm available for any questions, and appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you very much. Okay, so there is, I believe, no one else signed up to speak on this matter. So I would like to now allow for questions and comments from commissioners. Commissioner McIntosh.
I'm just curious. So in the photograph of the Piedmont, you were showing a pool. Is there going to be a pool provided at this apartment complex on Holden Road? I mean, Pacific Drive. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
Pacific Drive. Excuse me.
I'd like to defer to Greg Gleason.
No problem. Yeah, I mean, you know, we haven't finalized the amenity package, but almost certainly there will be a pool here.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I will say this location rings some alarm bells for me. You know, to the south of it is a FedEx shipping facility. And, you know, we're talking about some of the densest apartments we've seen in reviewing these cases on Planning Commission. This is, you know, 21 plus units per acre. Next to the railroad tracks, behind, you know, some offices. And we heard in the staff report that there's limits on retail and industrial areas to preserve the industrial character. And then I'm thinking about in the comp plan, when we see pictures of residential areas and when people are told about comprehensive plans vision, it's that we're going to have mixed use of residential and retail often. And so it's confusing to me to call, you know, what sounds like an apartment complex mixed use. I'm not, to me, because things are being labeled this way, it makes me think that there's something else going on, and that may not be fair, but it makes me question what's actually being proposed, just because I don't trust the way this is being described.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner McIntosh. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Lampman.
Mine might is Pacific Drive a public road?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Is Pacific Drive a public road?
This is Jason Myers with Transportation. Yes, I believe the section that's already there is accepted for city maintenance. It's on our street plan, map T1 of the comprehensive plan, and the long-term plan is to build a grade separation and extend it over to Old Lake Forest Road. So it is absolutely an important public street.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Winters.
Thank you. I am echoing the comments of Commissioner McIntosh because it is somewhat confusing, or more so say concerning, how this is labeled versus what we're seeing. In addition to the comment, when the direct question was asked about a pool, that a direct answer was not given, probably. Because typically what we've seen in situations like this is that a developer knows exactly what they're going to do. So I'm uncomfortable with the ambiguity that I'm hearing. So I would like to hold this so we can get maybe some more definity, some more specificity is the word I want, around this development. So we know exactly what's going on and we can speak from a clear perspective.
Commissioner Winters, might you have some specific conditions or points of clarification related possibly to policy that the applicant can address?
To policy, I might need some help with the policy aspect, but when we're sitting back talking about commercial residential mixed use, and this, I don't see where the commercial aspect is in this development. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful product. I'm just concerned about the inconsistency of usage in terms of how this is being declared.
This
Thank
is Molly Stewart. I'm happy to address that.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Sure. So you're right that there is this residential mixed use district and allows for some quite limited additional uses, and the proposal truly is for an apartment building. So I absolutely don't want to communicate any ambiguity about that. The mixed use districts are permissive, and sort of don't necessarily require a particular mix of uses, and so I hope that that's not misleading, and that's the district requested. But we can certainly answer with clarity as to that primary use.
Thank you. I believe on the report, in the staff report, the inconsistent policy was LU 11.3 commercial uses in industrial areas. And since the intent of this rezoning is for residential, is that something that the applicant would be interested or willing to not include commercial uses in this rezoning?
Is the question whether we would require commercial uses?
Or not include them disinclude them as part of the rezoning?
To prohibit them. Okay. Sure. Gotcha. I think that's something we could certainly consider on our end, and potentially come back with a condition regarding that.
Thank you. I'm looking at the future land use map, and I see that, to the west of it is medium density residential. This is envisioned to be part of office and residential mixed use. And potentially with Pacific Drive being extended and ultimately connected to Old Wake Forest, I think what's there, it's maybe not a very ideal site to live in as present. It's, might not be my favorite choice, but in terms of the future land use map, I see it as potentially trying to sort of fill in the vision that's there for the future. Just wanted to add those comments. Commissioner McIntosh.
I was just going to add, I think conditions I'd be interested in seeing would be assurance that residents who live in this apartment complex will have a good quality of life as envisioned in the comprehensive plan, so that this development, is fully aligned with the pictures we see in the comp plan. And, if this developer is showing us pictures of a pool, maybe there's a condition that there will be a pool, if that's what you're saying, or if you're not providing a pool, let us know that. But to make sure that this development is similar to other apartment developments in Raleigh and is not, when I'm looking at this, it looks like it's something different. It looks like very dense development, kind of pushed back in a corner that maybe some people on this commission wouldn't necessarily want to rent in. And I don't think it's good for the future of Raleigh to be developing different parts of town in a different manner.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner McIntosh. Commissioner Winters.
I would like to know the materials that would be used, because again, when we're looking at a picture, the picture was absolutely beautiful. But to know, is this what is to be expected in terms of a product, as well as, since it is on this railroad line, again, it doesn't seem the most desirable, so close to a railroad, but what are the plans to try to mitigate as much sound as possible being that close to a railroad, an active railroad?
Thank you, Commissioner Winters. Commissioner Lampman.
My question is around the railroad as well. Is this the same railroad that might turn into a commuter rail?
This is Jason Myers in Transportation. This is the S-line corridor that's planned for passenger trains, both from a standpoint of commuter rail in the county's metropolitan in the region metropolitan transportation plan, and also as a high-speed intercity passenger trains to Richmond and points north. And I believe NCDOT is either in the process or has executed a purchase of that line. freight on this will be very much secondary to passenger trains. And completion of the, completion of the high-speed rail project would eliminate the grade separations in this area, according to the NEPA document that was prepared. And in many cases, the grade separations are what cause trains to be loud because of the necessity to blow horns. And that when we don't have grade separations, a passenger train going by is actually pretty quiet. I don't know if anybody's had the privilege of being in Pullen Park when an Amtrak train has come down the North Carolina Railroad through there. It rumbles a little bit and you hear the engine, but it's not the constant, a freight train that takes a long time to pass, or the horns blaring and blaring and blaring for safety reasons.
Thank you. Commissioner Lampman?
Yeah, so, and I agree, because I think that there's a lot of development in like downtown Raleigh that has the railroad tracks nearby, but wanted to ask, as you're looking at the purchase of this line, is there any additional consideration into where stops might be located along the way? For example, I'm just thinking, would a location like this, would residents have the ability to reach a station relatively easily and then assist them in getting, to and from downtown without creating traffic along Atlantic?
There are not plans for specific station locations, and in general, the type of commuter rail service or regional rail service that's in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan is not likely to have a lot of stops. So while I can't locate where the potential stops are going to be, I wouldn't necessarily expect them to be in Atlantic. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. It just does not mean it's a likely thing. And I honestly think that from a local transit perspective, bus service is really a much bigger driver of ridership in terms of getting downtown or something. Service that's planned on Atlantic Avenue and exists on Millbrook and New Hope Church and Hardemont Roads is really where we would see a lot of bus service. If I'm not mistaken, I'm going to look back at my map. The frequent transit network line is expected to be, that's probably a little further south. There is service in the area, but I was about to say something about frequent transit. That was my mistake.
Okay, thank you. So I had one comment, and then I wanted to try to summarize what we have, what we've discussed here. One comment is, I believe this rezoning is located within the area plan, the Midtown St. Albans small area plan. And so I just wanted to point that out, that I think following along with the future land use map, there's a different vision for this area than the conditions that exist currently. I've heard from commissioners that sounds like the consensus is we'd like a little more information if the applicant is willing to provide additional conditions that would address removing the commercial use, providing a condition for an amenity area, perhaps a pool, a condition for what type of materials are anticipated used on the project. And am I missing anything? Commissioner Bennett.
I don't think you're missing anything. I just have a question. I noted in the staff report that this is a priority area for economic development, and there are a lot of things that make an area a priority area, but one of them was, it was adjacent to high poverty census tracts. And so I'm wondering if these apartment communities would be affordable to people in that area. I heard the applicant, I believe, say market rate. What is market rate for that area? It seems like if this area is designated in such a way to acknowledge that there are some concerns in the area, then what's developed there should attempt to address it.
Thank you. I will ask Greg Leeson to address anything we know today about potential rents, and we probably have some data. Just to clarify, by the way, the picture that was shown, that is the prior development in Raleigh of the same applicant. So not intended to be an example of this project necessarily, but simply an introduction to the applicant. But with that, I'll turn it over to Greg.
Yeah, and I apologize. I don't for my wording with respect to the pool. If there's anything misleading about that, we're absolutely contemplating a pool. That's sort of a central key amenity. So I apologize for any wording that sort of potentially implied ambiguity on that front. And again, as Molly described, that's a picture of the property that we were involved with developing a few miles north, and it's consistent with what we're anticipating for the project. So it's not an exact example, but it's certainly in line with what we're anticipating delivering. Market rate means that it's unrestricted. It's not subsidized housing in any capacity. But as a good indicator, our other project we're currently marketing 2 bedrooms for $1,400. I think 1 bedrooms are around $1,100. And so whereas it's not restricted affordable, it generally has found a lot of appetite in the market, and has been an affordable price point for the market, but is not technically restricted or subsidized.
Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you for that answer. To staff, when an area is designated as a high priority or priority area for economic development, are there any types of incentives or policy guidances to try to encourage development that addresses the priority of the area? It seems like it's designated that way for a reason. So if developments go in that don't address it, I'm curious as to why it gets the designation. Do they get some sort of special tax incentive for developing there, regardless of whether they address the issue?
So let me just give a couple clarifications. So the priority areas for economic development map is a map of the economic development element of the comp plan, and the primary criteria for inclusion are either that you're in a census block group where 40% or more of it is zoned for non-residential uses and is considered high poverty or adjacent to high poverty block groups. Another criteria for inclusion is when 40% or more of the block group is zoned for industrial use. And it may be the latter category that puts this in that area, although we would have to double check, and we could provide that information at the next meeting. In terms of implementation, right now the city has some economic development incentive programs related to job development and building upfit, and typically those are available citywide, but an enhanced version of them are available in these priority areas. So the programs are targeted for business investment and job development, and they just simply provide an enhanced benefit if you're in one of these areas. So it's a way of trying to target certain geography that would be more in need of economic opportunity.
Thank you. So I have a question for the applicant. Would the applicant be open to providing some additional conditions based on the comments that I made earlier, and then return to the commission at our next meeting?
Absolutely. We'll obviously need to kind of sit down and discuss on our end, but absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So with that in mind, unless you have new questions or specific conditions you'd like the applicant to address, Commissioner Lampman?
I just had something for staff as they look into the designation of a high priority item. I did look this up and it is in a qualified census tract determined by HUD, which is encouraged for development supporting families in need and low-income families. So just that'll help support, I think.
Thank you. Commissioner Winters, did you have your hand up? Oh, we lost you.
Hitting wrong buttons. Just it would be helpful not only with the materials but with the projects that you've had before to bring a representation of what this will be, a closer representation to what it will be. That will be helpful to actually see what you were proposing in addition to the materials that you will be using.
Okay,
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will hold this case at the table until our next meeting. Thank you, everybody. That takes us through all the discussion items on our agenda. Next is approval of the minutes, and I would like to entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes for both the January 26th Planning Commission meeting and the January 28th Committee of the Whole. Commissioner Bennett.
Before we get to the motion, I have a correction.
Oh, thank you.
For the Planning Commission meeting minutes, on page 6, agenda item F said Z5020 Holden Road, but that should be Pleasant Grove Church Road. And the description underneath it needs to be changed because it's describing Holden Road and not Pleasant Grove Church Road. And I think there was a discussion item that was missing that could prove important. I listened to some of the questions that council asked when our items go before them. So the discussion item that we had after Commissioner Fox made the motion, we talked about holding it so the applicant could do a second neighborhood meeting. And I didn't see that. And I think, oh, and also on page 8, it says the vote was unanimous 5-2. So it just needs to be changed to say it wasn't unanimous. And that's all I saw.
Thank you very much for those corrections. With that, I would like to move approval with the corrections that Commissioner Bennett noted of the January 26th Planning Commission meeting minutes and the January 28th Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. Do I have a second? Commissioner Bennett seconds the motion?
Yes, second.
Thank you. I'll ask Shanitha for a roll call of members.
Sorry, getting my notes. Okay. Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fox?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hicks?
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner Winters?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous and it passes. Thank you, everybody. Now we move on to the election of officers. We will take each position individually, and I'll ask for a nomination for each position and for a second. We will take a vote by a show of hands. We will have 3 positions to vote on, and I'd like to begin with the chairperson. So I would like to nominate Commissioner Fox for chairperson. Is there a second? Commissioner Miller.
Second.
Thank you. Okay. So we have a nomination and a second, and all those in favor, raise your hand. And any opposed? I guess that's unanimous, so there wouldn't be opposed. So congratulations, Chairperson Fox. Next, I will take nominations for Vice Chairperson, and I'll entertain a nomination for Vice Chairperson. Commissioner Lampman?
I would like to nominate Commissioner Winters for vice chair position.
Okay, and a second, Commissioner Bennett?
Second. Excuse me, second.
Thank you. All right, all those in favor of Commissioner Winters as vice chairperson, raise your hand. And it's unanimous, so it passes. The next item is secretary. I'll entertain a motion for secretary. I'd like to nominate Michelle McIntosh again. She fulfilled that role beautifully before. A second, Commissioner Lampman. Okay.
Second.
All those in favor of Commissioner McIntosh as secretary, raise their hand. And any opposed, raise their hand. And that passes, I believe. I did not see your hand up, Commissioner Winters, so I believe, oh, okay, that's unanimous. Thanks. Well, thank you all very much. I think that wraps up the elections. Commissioner McIntosh has been secretary, but I did want to just read the description. This position maintains the minutes of the records of the Planning Commission and traditionally requests that staff maintain the records. Commissioner McIntosh, would you like to ask staff to maintain the record of the Planning Commission?
Yes, I would please. I would like staff to continue maintaining the record of the Planning Commission.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McIntosh. Okay, now on to a report of the chairperson. No report. I just wanted to say it's been my honor and privilege to serve as vice chair with you all and under several chairs, Chair Swank, Jeffries, and Tomasulo. And I appreciate the staff support and look forward to serving the remainder of my term on the commission. And congratulations to everybody, to Chairperson Fox and Vice Chair Winters. And with that, on to report of any members. Are there any members have reports? Commissioner Lampman.
I also just wanted to thank you and Chairperson Tomasulo for everything that you've done in leading these groups. And I look forward to working with soon-to-be Chair Fox and soon-to-be Co-Chair Winters.
Thank you. All right. Now on to the Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. I also want to thank you, Vice Chair Hicks, for your service. It's been a joy working with you, and congratulations to our new and continuing officers. I also wanted to add that the Transportation Committee's next meeting will be the 25th at 3 o'clock, immediately before Committee of the Whole. I think the pending items in our agenda items said February 23rd, and it will be the 25th. It's always immediately preceding Committee of the Whole, unless we need to change it for some reason. And also, I wanted to say that I'm looking forward to when we get to hear staff's report on the including equity in our staff reports. I was excited to see that that's coming. I think we had some discussions today that sort of remind us of why that is important. And I'm looking forward to seeing what we are able to do with that. And I appreciate staff's hard work pulling that together. I need to acknowledge as a planner, as a professional planner, planners have to own our role in creating, reinforcing, and upholding inequality that we see in development, in land use, housing affordability, transportation, all the things that we're trying to address now in terms of inequality, from an economic perspective, from a racial perspective, planners have to own, the role that planning has played in that. I do appreciate that there seems to be an acknowledgement by the planning profession and lots of action steps being taken to address those. And I'm excited about whatever small role we may be able to contribute to that. I think we always have to, we're being reminded on our cases about what our role is as a planning commission, and to look at the land use and to look at things on a case-by-case basis. And I get it, but we can't just look at it on a case-by-case basis. We can't just look at the land use, because it affects people and it affects systems much larger than the one little parcel that we're looking at. And I would offer that if we continue to do things the way we have done things, we're going to continue to get what we've always got. So we have to acknowledge that planning, zoning, planning commissions have upheld policies that sometimes get us to the results that we don't want. And so while it is important that we do our jobs to the extent that we are able to, in terms of looking at each individual case, in terms of looking at the land use, we have to go beyond that. And we have to ask questions like, what's happening in this greater community? What is the income of people in this area? Can they afford what you're proposing? That's why I ask those questions like that a lot, because if we really want to attack the systems of inequality as we say we want to, then we have to, as a commission, make recommendations and decisions that show we are committed to that. If we don't, then we are complicit in the very thing that we say we're trying to get rid of. And I don't want us to be. And I don't think any of us want to be. I think we all are aware of inequalities and how planning and zoning and land use contribute to that. And I think we're all trying to do the best we can to address them in the fairest way, the most objective way we can. But we just have to be aware and acknowledge those things when we see them. And I appreciate everybody's efforts in trying to do that. And I look forward to seeing what more we can do as a commission to address those systems of inequality. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner Bennett. Okay. Yes, Commissioner or Vice Chair Winters?
Vice Chair-elect. No, that's right. Okay, so just kidding. I wanted to say in terms of the Strategic Planning Commission that we're meeting next week on the 16th, starting at 10 o'clock. And in under the umbrella of Black History Month, we're going to take a look at the historic Black communities that have been in Raleigh, just to get a general overview of history, understand who they are, where they are, who the people were, just to get a better understanding. And I think that also ties into our goal for equity and what that means in areas that are being developed, how they're being developed, and who is possibly excluded from those very areas. I think it will be helpful for us to have that baseline information going forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Winters, Vice Chair Winters. Okay, now on to the report from looks like the Planning Director.
Sorry for the delay. So I'll give you updates on city council actions. You reported 3 items out, a text change to zoning conditions, the Lakes Drive, and 2 text changes, one for community gardens and one for quasi-judicial hearings. The two text changes were scheduled for the public hearing on March 2nd, but the lakes will actually be heard a week from today on February 16th, given the lack of controversy and outstanding issues. They wanted to accelerate that case. On the other hand, Z4320 Trailwood Drive, which you also reported out, has been held for 2 weeks for some additional conversation with the neighbors before the public hearing is scheduled. There are some items that have been deferred but not yet decided upon, including Z4120 ACC Boulevard and Z4520 New Hope, Buffalo New Hope. Those will be back on the council agenda next week. I believe there is at least one new stormwater condition attached to the ACC Boulevard case. Several items were approved at the public hearing. They included the rezonings at Raleigh Beach Road and on Glenwood Avenue, which was the 40-story tower behind the creamery, on West South Street, and on Wade Avenue. Due to some comments that came in after that, there'll be a second reading, and that will also be on the agenda, the Wade Avenue case, C3520, a week from today. Z4020 on Hillsborough Street was approved, and the short-term rental text change was approved. You received your time extension for CP 320, which you of course acted upon today. So that deadline has been met. And then you also received a 60-day, or you have one item referred to you with a 60-day review period, which was CP 520 omnibus amendments in the comprehensive plan progress report. For those of you who have not seen this before, we produce an annual progress report, and part of that is taking a look at any amendments that are necessary to the plan to retire completed action items or refine policies based on trends and other issues that have been identified throughout the year. So that'll be landing on your agenda soon. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Okay, and with that, that concludes the meeting of the Planning Commission, and we are adjourned. Thank you.